And I'm excited to welcome into the studio my guests this morning for the show. And my guests are Kwame Jantwa. He's a member of the CPP and vice chair of the PIAC and an advisor for civil society platform on oil. Also in the studio is the Honorable Mahama Ayariga. He's a lawyer and MP for Boku Central and chairman, subsidiary legislation committee of Parliament. Yao Pong is a lawyer and teaches the law at the Central University. Also in the studio is a very good friend and brother, Joseph Dindiok Pemka. He is MP, is a lawyer, MP for Timpani, and Deputy Attorney General and Minister for Justice. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the studio.
Good morning. Good morning.
Right. And particularly to Pemka, we haven't had you here in a long while. We had you once. Thanks for making the time to come to the studio, and also to Mr. Kwame Jantwa as well. Now, we are starting from Kenya. And as you know, yesterday, the results were eventually declared, and Uhuru Kenyatta has been retained. But Raila Odinga and his team, the NASA group of politicians who came together to form the opposition, are not in favor of the results as declared. As you know, some lives already lost and some vandalism reported and so on. But there's a lot that has happened in there that may provide some learning for Ghana, particularly our electoral commission. So that's the gossip in town. Of course, you know that our own Peter McManu went there together with some other people who were refused, or who were brought back, or deported back, repatriated back, whichever term that has been used into the country.
He's back.
Well, all results in being back, like Alphonse says. So what exactly can we say about the Kenyan elections? And our president, John Mahama, has been there speaking, and I say, coincidentally, very interestingly, the results that gave him his defeat appear to represent the results that gave Raila Odinga his defeat, and the results that gave President Akufo-Addo his victory appear to mimic the results that gave Kenyatta his victory. So let's listen to the Electoral Commission in Kenya and Uhuru Kenyatta, as well as Raila Odinga, and we'll return to the studio to do the discussion. Right, so you've heard the Electoral Commission in that country, the IEBC, and also you had Uhuru Kenyatta being very, magnanimous in victory, and then Raila Odinga, the opposition leader, who is disputing the results and suggesting that there is evidence of rigging, some sort of tampering with the entire election system. So it does appear, start with Honorable Ayariga, it does appear that the initial information that we had that, which we now know is not what it is, that McManu of the NPP was going there and was stopped because he had something around him that could assist them to hack. Even in his absence, there is still hacking that is reported. What do you say about the process in Kenya?
Thank you very much, and good morning to viewers and listeners. I think it's been a while that I've also been here.
That's true. That's true.
Well, I mean, elections being what they are, usually for such national elections, you have situations where candidates seek assistance from all manner of places. They try to get resources that will help them in the elections. Some of those resources are financial, Some of them are technical support, especially in these days when elections have also become electronic in nature, where voting is done electronically in some cases, transmission of results are done electronically in some cases, and data is collected and all sorts of things. Some countries in country don't have the expertise and the skills, and so they will look outside for people with the competencies to assist them. So it's quite legitimate to find political parties seeking assistance from people who have been through it and who have the skills and the competencies to manage the process, especially when it is the first time that they are going through these things. Sometimes they reach out to those people. Other times, those people go there to sell their expertise to them and hope that they will engage them as resource persons to assist with those elections. So that is, in my opinion, very legitimate. It's the same way that international consultants roam the world to find wherever there's work and to perform those jobs.
Here, so speaking specific to McManu and his, he being prevented from entering that country, I think that's a more safe expression to use, being prevented from entering that country. Although we understand they got in, taken to some police station, and then later brought and put on a flight back to the country. The suspicion was that, as we have read, and the government issued a statement, was that he has been successful here in Ghana in creating a parallel tabulation system that helped the NPP to clearly know the way forward when the elections were being run, and that he was going to do a similar thing for them, help them. Although the truth, as we know now, is that he was rather a leader of an observation group, that is the Democratic Union.
Well, I don't know what the truth is. I mean, I can't confirm what the truth
Officially,
is.
this is what it's supposed to be.
It depends on who is speaking.
Okay.
The Kenyans don't have that as their truth. The Kenyans have him as somebody who they suspect was coming into their country to meddle in their electoral process, for which reason they took steps to take him out of the country. I haven't heard McManu himself speak. I've heard the Minister for Information speak, in which he expressed the fact of government not being interested in the outcome of the results. I cannot tell whether government is interested or disinterested in the outcome of results. But I know as human beings, we all have our preferences and interests. And so it is difficult to appreciate that they in government did not have an interest one way or the other. We all have interests. I mean, I have my interest there. I mean, I, for some strange reason, supported one candidate, even though I don't live there. When the Americans were having their elections, I had my preference, even though I don't live in America and I don't vote in America. And you did also. So all of us do.
We all did.
So there's nothing wrong with...
You supported Trump?
Yes. Okay. So there's nothing wrong
Good
with...
luck to you.
There's nothing wrong with the information minister.
And co. Keep enjoying your Trump.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with the information minister saying that we are ideologically aligned with the NASA, and therefore would have preferred that they won the election. There's also nothing wrong with NDC saying, well, we are ideologically aligned with Uhuru Kenyatta, and therefore we prefer that.
A very good friend of President Mahama.
Well, I won't say a very good friend of President Mahama. I would say that they were colleague heads of state, and therefore they knew each other and they had a relationship.
Right.
So for me, there's nothing wrong with stating your preference.
Okay.
And I also think that there's nothing wrong with McManu trying to get into Kenya to help the opposition if they needed his services and felt he was capable of doing that. To the extent that he's not going there as an agent of the government of Ghana, then that becomes a problem.
Right.
But if
and
he's
the
there because
statement...
he has ever managed an election using similar technologies and has the skills, and they wanted him there, there's nothing wrong with that. Right. I don't see any problem with that. But the problem for me is when we deny and then start saying that this is not true, that is not true, because people cannot prove. People can see and read in between the lines. So I think McManu can be upfront about it and say, hey, look, I was going there to provide my expertise to one side or the other.
You seem to say that you have your suspicion and your suspicion confirms what had been put out earlier to be the suspicion why he was denied entry into the country?
Well, I mean, it is logical to conclude that that is what the Kenyans suspected, and that is why they took him out of their country. It's logical. If he was part of an international observer mission, first and foremost, if it's an international observer mission, and Kenya is acting within the Committee of Nations, and their country is in any way involved with that organization, I find it very difficult for them to remove him the way that they removed him. Because
but besides that,
the Committee of Nations, you don't just do
Manu
that.
is known to travel globetrots on election matters. He's been almost everywhere.
And yeah, and that's even serious because knowing his stature in Ghana, if for any reason they would have been mindful of the way they would treat him because they know he was chairman of the political party that is in power in Ghana and that has formed the government of Ghana, and therefore going forward in their relationship with Ghana, whatever they do in relation to McMenu may have an impact on their relationship with Ghana. So I think that unless they had very strong suspicions that he was going to meddle in a way that they didn't want him to, they will not risk their relationship with Ghana, treating him the way
Uhuru
that
Ghana
they
had 54% and Raila Odinga 44% of the votes, and Raila is not accepting. Do you suspect that things may not be well for may not be well for the country?
Well, I think so. I monitored yesterday. I spent the whole time watching television just to witness the counting of the results, the collation, the declaration, and then the various responses. They refused to even participate in the process of announcing the results. They held a press conference. They declared it as a fraud and all that. And you could see that in his strongholds, there's already some violent reaction. As of this morning, I was monitoring the news, and last night there was some strong violent reaction in a few key areas. But the military and then the security agencies are trying to bring all that under control. I think that was expected because it was a very tense campaign. And I think both sides had invested so much into the elections. And usually when there's such a tense campaign and there's so much investment, when people feel disappointed, it takes time for you to bring them under some control. I believe that
especially when you're not losing for the first time.
Especially when, you know, in his case, it seems to him that that is his last opportunity and he might never get another opportunity to be a candidate and be president of Kenya.
As it seemed for Nanado in 2012.
Let's leave the Nanado portion of it out. I will say that the international community needs to move in and try and then find a way of dialoguing with him so that he can bring his supporters under some control. And I believe that if indeed there's fraud, the courts are there. I believe that they've done so much work to reform the electoral system, and the international community who observed came to a conclusion that the system did work well. I believe that if there's a challenge and it goes to the courts, the same international committee will be there to watch and observe to ensure that the judicial process also lives up to expectation and does justice in order that we can sustain the peace that is in Kenya.
They have been to the court before over their elections, and in their situation, it takes just a little over a month to have an election dispute completely, you know, dusted. It doesn't take them. It doesn't take them months. They have set in the rules that this is what has to happen, and it happens just in that way. Now, what do you say first about the developments regarding, you know, McMenu and co? And we understood that he's not the only one who suffered that situation. There were other people from other countries, including Europe, who suffered that similar situation.
Good morning, Simon. Good morning to fellow panelists and all those listening to us and watching us. McMenu isn't a novice in going to Kenya. He's monitored Kenyan elections for quite some time. It's not the first time. The Kenyans have their own reasons why they decided to deport McMenu. And for me, I don't see what the reason is if there is no evidence to show that McMahon has involved in this type of thing before. I don't think in Ghana, although he was very vocal in terms of getting to make sure that the election was run on an even keel.
He announced victory ahead of the Electoral Commission doing so.
Well, he did announce victory, but that was wrong. I would take it as an aberration on his part.
You think this is what may have informed the Kenyans?
Well, why? Why would they fear anything? Why does McMahon have people within Kenya who he would now gang up with and do what they thought he was going to do?
He belongs to the Democratic Union of Africa, right? And that Democratic Union, I suspect, is a union that Raila Odinga's party belongs.
Yes, but
and the opposition belong.
But do we see that union doing all these types of things all over Africa? I think the most important thing is the fact that people do not lose their lives because of elections. I think that is key. That if there's an election and your person didn't win, people should die and people should be murdered. I think for me that is key. In terms of Raila Odinga, he's 72. We have the oldest serving president on the African continent. He's 90. How old is Trump? For me, age isn't a key. When the people decide that they do not want a particular person to be their president anymore, it doesn't matter what age you are. Our own Nanado, you made a reference. How old is he? 72. He will decide whether he's going to go the next 4 years. It's his decision. But so far,
he seems to be dropping hints that he may not.
Well, he dropped hints earlier on when after the court case that he might or might not. That is neither here nor there. I mean, if his party feel that he's the person that they want him to stand, that's his decision. When you look at
power has a spiritual way of possessing you and getting you to change your thoughts.
Honorable will tell you, I've never been in power before, but I've been around power before, and I know that yes, it has a different way. As you see, political parties in opposition will say all the nice things. The moment they get in, they change and say different things. So where power is concerned, you can never tell what people's mindset is. But in terms of the percentage votes, 54 to 44. There's something did happen within the opposition's camp that probably shifted the votes of Kenyatta to 54. At a certain point, they were at par. At a certain point, they were at par. But in the long run, Kenyatta has won. Let's move forward. For me, Africa has the greatest potential to be a strong superpower. It can only happen if we have leaders who think where Africa is concerned. And the poverty rates, not only in Kenya, not only in Ghana, in the whole of Africa. Right now we hear that President Trump has banned U.S. lottery visa. So it's going to be a challenge for a lot of Africans who depended on that to probably better their lives. We can do it in Africa. And if it so happens that, yes, if it so happens that Kenyatta has come second round, what he wasn't able to do in his first term, he should now try and do in his second term. So that going forward, Kenya is a vibrant nation. Kenya is a strong nation.
Any learnings for you from the process there, even though it sounds very typical of elections in Africa? One must accept victory, one must not accept, and there must be some eruption of violence before, people will now come to their senses and say, okay, look, let's preserve the state instead.
We haven't had that in Ghana, have we?
In Ghana?
In terms of violence?
We have been able to sort of prevent and avoid it from escalating. But
so it's a gradual
process. We have gotten to the tipping points before.
We've gotten to a tipping point, but we haven't gotten to the actual action. And I think it's kudos to the Ghanaian public. I think the Kenyan public and most African countries where you have these types of violence, gradually we would get to that point. We got to, some time ago, presidents would stay in power for as long as they wanted. Now we have just few in Africa. We have Equatorial Guinea, we have Angola, we have one or two of them still, loitering around. Very soon, the whole economy of an African country would really determine who comes into power.
Okay.
And let's hope that going forward, we all begin to learn from each other.
Right.
And we all begin to make sure that Africa is that continent where Africans would like to live in.
Right. Honorable Deputy Attorney General, did you follow how the results were transmitted? If you can start on that note, and what you think or what you thought they did so well that we couldn't do as an election management body in Ghana.
Oh, I wouldn't go there. Quite frankly, I have monitored the process in that country as well. But you see, I have heard my brothers articulate very well their positions on this issue. You see, I seem to have a slightly different opinion regarding especially the treatment meted out to the Venerable Manu and then other people. You see, that was in the estimation of the government, perhaps they saw that the presence of Manu and other people was going to be injurious to the electoral process of that particular country and perhaps compromise them. And that was the reason for whatever decision they took. Now, play it the other way around. How about the opposition? If they saw that there were people who had come into the country on the invitation of either the president or representing other international organizations, which people were also aligning themselves to the ruling government, what happens? This is the aspect of it that I have not seen people actually discuss in a greater detail. Because you suspect that these people are coming in and perhaps they will try and get into your electoral system and influence it in one way or the other in favor of the opposition. How about the opposition also suspecting that, look, there are other people, and I can give you an example of this, that we all know that quite clearly His Excellency former President John Dramani Mahama is a friend of Uhuru Kenyatta. That's a fact. And he has also gone there as an eminent statesman to represent an international body in that particular country. And the opposition raises a red flag and says, look, you are a close friend of this person, you are coming to assist him. Where are we going? We're going to run a kind of chair system that at the end of it all, we will defeat the very purpose of the elections that we are carrying through. So I think that the country should not have acted the way they did. They have the security apparatus of the country at their disposal. How can one Manu get in there, beat all these security apparatus, and then hack into the system and manipulate elections? That fear, if they entertained it at all, was unreasonable, so to speak. So, you see, no nation is an oasis of itself. We all live in a community of nations. And so, because no nation is an oasis of itself and we all live in a community of nations, we ought to treat each other with some level of respect and decorum to ensure that at the end of it all, we try to integrate, and that which we aspire for ourselves as Africans, we achieve. Now, let me play this out. Imagine that thereafter, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta and His Excellency Nana Addo meet at a particular conference. I mean, how will each of them take the other, so to speak, amongst their colleagues and all that? Naturally, it's a natural thing. I mean, you cannot pretend that His Excellency Nana Addo, when he meets him, yes, they will interact.
I suspect they would have a laugh. They would have a laugh because it's possible to just ignore it and say, look, it's one of those.
I agree, but you see, let's look at the president who has won the elections, who has retained the seat. He comes to Ghana on a visit, or His Excellency Nana Addo goes there. They will talk out. Yes, we will listen to them speak. We will hear them, and then everything will be as usual. But deep in them, naturally, they will have some level of antagonism, unless you want to pretend and tickle yourself. So I am saying that the treatment meted out to Manu and others could have been better handled. It could have been better handled in the circumstances of this matter. In any case, nobody has ever, in any court or any civil society organization, found Manu culpable of manipulating elections anywhere. Unless they could have told us that they have all the antecedents and they have all the records to show that he's a master rigger of elections or manipulator.
But I made a reference to what he did, you know, on the eve of the elections and in Ghana, and which of course the international, you know, community was following, that he was doing something that was wrong. He didn't have to go ahead of the official entity that was supposed to say, these are the results, you have won or you have lost.
No, but that's why I'm saying that. Were they saying that he was going to Kenya to announce results? That's not it. You see, let's put everything in perspective. And let's find out whether as an individual he had the capacity to do whatever anybody would have suspected he would do.
But
and I think that he had no
news,
such capacity.
that news he attracted to himself, not provide reasonable grounds for what the Kenyans did.
Again, but that is even defeatist, so to speak, because from your intro, you made it very clear, and I have listened to the international community, that he wasn't the only one.
Yes.
So are the others also having the same history? So it cannot be correct. That conclusion will be flawed. So I am saying that it could have been better handled at a diplomatic level to ensure that we don't get to where we are. But something on a certain note, if you look at the language of the two protagonists, I enjoyed a certain bit of it. Uhuru Kenyatta in victory was very calm, and you could realize that his message was conciliatory, and I like that. And if you listen to Raila Odinga to the end, he was also very emphatic. He urged all the people not to engage in any violence. He said he was heading to the Supreme Court. That is procedure and processes. What is legal? What are the procedures you need to follow in circumstances like this to ensure that justice is actually gotten? So I think that we have to commend both of them, but urge all Kenyans to remain calm so that the Supreme Court that is responsible for doing same will ensure that they make pronouncement that will bring finality to the issue. Finally, if you look at the suspicions that Raila Odinga raised, the Electoral Commission then comes in and says that, yes, you are saying that there was hacking, but what we have seen is that there was attempted hacking. And that's very interesting, isn't it? And these ones will be determined by evidence.
Okay.
So when they go to court, they will adduce evidence, whether there was hacking or not. There will be evidence adduced to either substantiate or put that to rest, so that this issue will be dealt with.
And that would be important. Let's hope that there will be some explanation to it for people to clearly understand. Unlike here in Ghana, where there was some, suggestion of that nature and no explanation whatsoever.
Whether he was traveling on private passport or on diplomatic or official passport. Those are all facts that are important.
Okay.
Because how you treat somebody entering your country with a diplomatic passport or official passport will be different from how you treat a person.
So finally, let's hear from you, Yao. And I'm interested, if you followed, what is it that we can learn from them?
Well, thank you very much. I think that one thing that struck me, and I expected that these elections, by the end of it all, may result in some serious disputes, is the death of their ICT, the ICT aspect of the Electoral Commission, about 9 days before the election. And we are told that he was brutally murdered. And that really struck me, because we are also told that he was in charge of the development of the digital ballot, the electronic balloting system that they had just introduced. But then I guess there were other people he had trained and they took over. I listened to the BBC interview of some of the European Union representatives who said that, well, whilst an allegation of hacking may be made and investigated, in terms of the observation at the polling stations, there was not much disturbances, and that, in their view, generally speaking, the elections were transparent. Yes, so I think people should still, perhaps they should read the Supreme Court's decision on our own presidential election. It is all about polling agents. And if you decide, there's this thing going around social media of some counting of alleged votes in Kenya, and people are wondering, you jump from 99 to 300 or so. I don't know whether, in fact, it's a representative of what happened in Kenya, but it tells you how, if you fail to invest in your polling agents or the representatives on the ground, you can only get this result. And in most cases, when people are disputing it, they dispute in terms of the transmission. But go to the source. I'm very sure that if the NPP today were still to argue about the transmission, the number of votes that were actually counted at the electoral committee, they will never find solution to this problem. And I think that they learned their lessons. They invested heavily in their representatives. They even formed some foundation budget. People were contributing to the polling agents because that is key. Without that, so when you are complaining, go back to the source. You don't talk about transmission problems per se as the overriding factor. So go to the source, collect the data. Weren't your representatives present? Were they compromised? If you don't talk about these things, people will find it difficult. The US is even fighting about alleged hacking or Russian interference in their elections.
Right.
And indeed, if somebody wants to disturb your system, they don't have to come to your country. They can be anywhere in space. And they can interfere with the recent bug, or whatever it's called, that hit a lot of computers and systems in the world. Did anybody really go to the US or the UK to do that? So then brings me to the treatment to Mr. McMahon. I think once again we should try and distinguish between government and party. And then Mr. Honorable Ayarga asked whether he traveled on diplomatic. Mr. McMahon, the last time I checked, he's not in government. He doesn't hold an official government position. He may be an appointee of a state institution.
On a board.
On the board. And that's why in a matter like this, the government shouldn't get involved unless the government wants some of its reps at the party level to just make a statement. And so Mr. McMahon himself, not having openly told us, or at least I haven't heard him, of what exactly happened, because Kenya is an established democracy, as we are. They would have charged, I've looked at their constitution. There are elaborate processes where you charge a person, tell him the offenses he has committed or he was about to commit and all that.
But yeah, Mr. McMahon is a citizen of Ghana.
That's right.
And if something like this happens to him elsewhere and it attracts international news, you're saying it is wrong for the government to issue a statement and say, among others, that, quote, we wish to make it clear the government of Ghana has no interest whatsoever in who emerges the winner in Tuesday's poll. The decision as to who leads Kenya for the next 4 years, rather 5 years, but I think they got it wrong here, as president remains the sole preserve of the Kenyan people. The Ghanaian constitution guarantees every citizen of Ghana the freedom to participate in political activity inside or outside of the country, within the laws of Ghana or wherever they find themselves. They do so in their own capacity as free citizens of a free state and not at the behest of the government of Ghana. You are saying for the government to come and state this, they have done some wrong?
I'm not saying that at all. It is a perfect statement to issue. But I'm saying that let's delineate the functions of government in matters like this from that of a citizen. Of course, the government of Ghana, for example, through the Foreign Affairs, can make a statement that the treatment of our citizen, that if indeed he did not break any law. I mean, recently we deported some Indians. They had to go to court, and the court ruled that that act of deportation was wrongful in law. So I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying that we would have been better off if Mr. McMahon himself had declared to all of us the circumstances under which he was deported, because there are conflicting information, which I was just checking. While the government is saying that they didn't have permit to work, the Raila Odinga's people are also saying that it is not about permit, that they did not even disembark, and that they were just refused entry. These are all information, different perspective. He should tell us, in my view, that is if he's minded, why or what was he told, and the rest of them.
Okay.
So, and so you bring too much upon yourself. But then talking about African Union and this kind of things that may happen around, he was, my friend was referring to the two presidents meeting. Of course, it will not portend well for us. But the fact still remains that countries have their rules, they have their laws. If for some reason they misapply the law, they know the consequences, because then the other country may also be fuel to do the same to your own country. And that is not what we want for
wrap up in a minute for us.
African Union.
Raila Odinga is doing this for the 4th time. Obviously, it does look like that's the end for him. Even though Penka refers to him suggesting they may go to court. One of his top guys, James Orengo, he says that they are not interested in taking the matter to court. Do you feel that he will genuinely get his supporters to not, misbehave, particularly in a country where election-related, violence has led to thousands, over 1,000 people dying, right. 600, being displaced?
Well, I think I listened to him and a deputy. The two of them have different dispositions. The deputy spoke in a very calm, and for the BBC interviewer was so impressed. But then when you listen to Mr. Raila Odinga's own declarations, they are at variance. And one is trying to, as it were, douse the disturbances, the fire. And the other is rather putting more fuel into it. And so the two of them will have to
Typical of an African opposition, right?
Well, not necessarily. I think it can happen everywhere. I mean, losing an election is not an easy thing, quote and unquote. But the point really is about managing, knowing that or accepting that the 5 years will definitely come. And if you don't become a president, it doesn't mean you are a failure. Other people may be the appropriate persons whom you can support. If we don't accept it, and we think that it is a do and die affair, interestingly, the rank and file listen to their leaders. The moment a leader said, have accepted the results, let's go back to work, they listen. Even though sometimes I don't hold brief for them because they are reasonable persons who should take decisions for themselves. But that's why we have leaders.
Okay.
And so I think that Mr. Odinga should just bury all this hurt, and he may be hurt, and just take a national broadcast and say that we have accepted the results, let us move on. If there is no Kenya, you cannot be a president of another country.
Why do you expect him to accept results when he has evidence that the system was hacked and that there's been rigging? Okay, so this is where we conclude this first part looking at what is happening in Kenya, and probably if there were any lessons for Ghana, it does appear that from the suggestions that you seem to get, we are doing better, so maybe there's really nothing to learn. But really, if you look at their system, how it went, it appears that they may have done a lot more better than we had managed our process.
Before you go, can I just make a quick point?
Yes, quickly, and then we take a break.
Do you know that Jomo Kenyatta's son is the current president, and the first vice president's son is Odinga? There's some heritage there. And it becomes very difficult when you've been in that kind of environment all your life to lose an election.
Right. And your panelists, congratulations to the Kenyans on a successful poll. It's unfortunate some lives have been lost, but really my question is this: has there ever been an African politician who, after losing especially a presidential election, conceded to defeat without faulting the process? Maybe from 1992, when my eyes opened to politics, it's only John Mahama who has done so. Raila and his party should move on, prepare better, and come back next time. John Mahama did that after cruising to defeat. He forgot that. Anyway, Abdul Aziz says, cruising to defeat and being in comfortable lead. After not inviting President Uhuru and inviting the opposition leader Raila Odinga to your inauguration, you expect Kenya to allow your MPP hackers into Kenya? No, they will not allow that. Okay, you're using some language I can't help you, spread on this platform. Henry Pama, you say you are amicus Henry Pama, says that Mr. Manu should be proud, and I am so proud of him to the extent that the Kenyans are aware that he could produce a parallel tabulation of results to bring out clean and credible results and so not allow him in their country. I say thumbs up to him. Okay. Musa Abattoir says that congratulations to Kenyans for showing the world they are also a democratic nation to reckon with. Deporting Manu is within their rights because they learned a lesson from Ghana's 2016 elections where results were hacked, were they? And 12 midnight, he called the, called the elections, all right? Okay, so thanks for those messages. There are many of you who cannot wait for a discussion on the NDC. We'll put that perhaps to the very end. This one too. Okay. Yes, there are just too many messages concentrating on the NDC. Abdul Karim Inusa says that repatriation of Peter Manu was a slap in the face of African democracy. He represented an organization, that's the Democratic Union of Africa, just as former President John Mahama did. Everybody knows the relationship between JM and Kenyatta, yet JM represented same without any question. Well, there were questions raised, except that he was not deported like Manu. Kofi Seidu, the deportation of Manu was in order because he has a track record of usurping a constitutionally mandated body to announce results, and probably Kenyans didn't want this to happen to them. Thank you. So can I move on to some other issues, right? Thank you very much indeed for your messages.